Hey people, welcome or welcome back to my channel. This is your weekly frappe on Eco, Biz and Tech, and this week's frappe is going to be about disinvestment. As you guys know, the union budget came out last week and it's been there everywhere, starting from the 7 o'clock chat show to the newspapers and even in our social medias. So we are not going to limit ourselves to disinvestment, India and the union budget. We are going to talk about disinvestment all around the world and how it has worked out for different countries, and especially we are going to talk about disinvestment in the stock market. So let's get on with today's video. A quick tip before we start, guys. Disinvest is sometimes called divest, and when you search the web you find divestment in some places instead of disinvestment. So let's move on. So what is disinvestment? So let's take an example. Let's say you own 10 robots and you're not able to maintain all those robots. So in order to make those robots more efficient and reduce your burden of maintaining them, because you're not able to, you sell certain robots off, maybe 3 or 4. So you get funds from that, and you're able to reinvest on the 7 robots left. So this is basically the whole crux of disinvestment. It's basically liquidation of your assets, and the main motive usually the company or the government has is to optimize the resources they have in order to increase the results, or sometimes it's just plainly to raise funds. So let's get on with a really interesting aspect of disinvestment. So this is for the stock market and business enthusiasts out there. If you're really interested in keeping track of how a company is performing, in getting to know a company, something that you can do is watch the shareholding pattern of a company. So if you see the promoter's share, that is the people who created the company, if they have a high amount of share in the company, it's really a positive sign. So it basically means that the company's creators trust the company, trust in the future of the company, so they hold a large amount of share in the company. So this is basically disinvestment. So at the beginning, the promoters would have disinvested in their company, made their company public, and later on, when their company is performing well, they trust in the future of the company and the performance of the company, and they reinvest in their own companies. So just go to websites like the NSE website or screener.com and go to the promoters share, go to the shareholding pattern of a company. So for example, let's take TCS. It's really a good company and it has been performing really good. So go to screener and just search for TCS and go to the investors section of the website. So you see the shareholding pattern, foreign direct investments, government, public and stuff. So these are the promoters shareholding. So as you can see in the figure, as time passes, the share of the promoter has increased. So this is a good sign. And basically, when you analyze a company before you invest, you do stuff like this. You see if the promoter trusts his or her own company. And let's see a contrasting example for this. Let's take the example of Yes Bank. Same screener, search for Yes Bank and go to the investors side. You see the shareholding pattern. Here, if you observe the promoter's shareholding pattern, starting from the March of 2018 to December of 2020, it has gradually decreased. This means that, and here in December, it's actually zero. This is not a really good sign for a good company, and people usually don't invest in such companies. This shows that the promoters, the creators of the company just don't trust in the future of company, and naturally the company is not doing good. So yeah, this is something that you can dwell on when you're free. Share market and business enthusiast instead of scrolling down your Instagram feed. So yeah, let's move on. So now let's see how disinvestment as a model has worked out for different countries around the world. So the first country is Singapore. Singapore has something called the Temasek Holdings, and this is an organization that's completely separate from the government. This organization manages all the government bodies that has been made public, and the fact that this organization is completely away from the government implies that the government is separate from the trade and business that happens in the country. This is good, at the same time a bad sign, but it naturally works for Singapore. The good thing is that the government cannot influence the trade and business, and the trade and business of a country is free from political influence, and that is the bad thing at the same time, because the government has no control over the business and trade happening inside the country. This works for Singapore because the politics and the population of Singapore is really different from other countries, and different countries have their own dynamics, and different things work for different countries. The second thing, oh yeah, and this is the small Singapore, and the second country that we are going to be looking at is China. China has a similar body called the State Owned Asset Supervision and Administration Commission. So this body manages all the public sectors that has been made private. So the government is not completely separate from the business that happens in the country like the Singapore model, but it supports and has great influence on sectors like energy, aviation and telecom. Another interesting fact that I read about Chinese model of disinvestment is that the main purpose of disinvestment from the public bodies for that the Chinese government believes is to keep up with the current technological trends. So in order to make that happen, make that possible, the public sectors are being made partially or completely private. So yeah, these are two really contrasting models, and these are two really good performing Asian countries. So now let's move on to the western part of the world. So moving on to the United Kingdom. So in the 1980s, one of the hastiest and fastest disinvestments were done by the United Kingdom, starting from the British Telecom, Airways, Power, British Petroleum, British Gas, British Rail, to the regional water bodies. 670 PSUs, that is public sector undertakings, were privatized. So it had its own pros and cons. For example, the telecom industry really boomed, the cost fell, and the quality improved, and the consumers really were happy when the telecom industry was privatized. But the water industry, that is the British regional water boards, really hit was really hit hard by the privatization. Prices increased by 15%, and each time someone paid upfront for a house, their water cost levied by the regional water boards, was really high. And at the end, the net result was unhealthy competition and basically public monopoly, which was there. The public sectors had great monopoly over commodities in Britain, turned into private monopoly after the 1980s. The second country in the West that we're going to be looking at is the US. And this is quite an interesting thing, because in the previous countries that we looked at, we saw disinvestment happening in the government. The government disinvested in its bodies and it became privatized. But the movement in 2011 that happened was initiated by college students, and it was the disinvestment of companies from fossil fuels. So this, the main motive was not to raise funds, but it was environmental concern. Uh, like students really urge companies to disinvest from fossil fuel resources of the United States, so that the government takes it up and the environment is maintained. So nearly a lot of this movement spread across a lot of countries, and as you can see, there are a lot of red dots. And in certain countries, this movement was success, and a lot of private companies divested from the fossil fuel resources of the country. But in certain places, the movement took a turn and it gradually failed. So let's move on to India. So disinvestment in India. The first thing that we as public and the government should be clear is about the motive of disinvestment. Is it to raise funds so as to bring back the economy after the pandemic, or is it to genuinely improve the quality of public sector companies? So, yeah, and there's solid proof that public companies which are public can perform well in India. So, the examples for that are ISRO. ISRO is a PSU. So, first of all, let me tell you the difference between a PSU and a PSE. Is a public sector undertaking, and the government has 51% or more authority over the organization. And a public sector enterprise is something that's 100%, that is fully government run. And ISRO is a PSU that's been really successful, and the KSDP, the Kerala State Drugs and Pharmaceuticals Limited, is the only PSE in the whole country that's really successful. This actually had its hit by 2016, and it was going through a really low phase, but now it's one of the most successful PSEs in our country. And medicine after the post medication of a surgery is really cheap in the KSDP in Kerala. So for example, a medication which costs 250 rupees is sold for 28 rupees in the Kerala State Drugs and Pharmaceuticals Limited. And the last thing that we need to talk about India is that disinvestment is a term that we came across in the budget, in the recently released budget. And they have been told that LIC, that's a public insurance corporation, along with two public sector banks and Air India, will be disinvested in by the government. But this is not final, because the recent updates say that the disinvestment, that is a strategic disinvestment, we are not completely disinvesting from our public sector organizations, we are strategically disinvesting. And the list of the organization shall be released by the Niti Aayog shortly. So that's it for India, guys. We should be proud of the public sector organizations like ISRO and KSTP, but at the same time we should give it a thought about disinvesting in organizations like LIC, because this is such an organization that has reached the roots of our country, and it actually supports the economy. So, yeah, think about it and let me know on what you think in the comments. So, hope you guys enjoyed the frappe, and do let me know in the comments on what you think about disinvestment in general and other stuff you want to hear in the upcoming frappes. So, let's catch up with another frappe next week. So, yeah, thank you.